I'm excited to share with you what I've learned and also to encourage us all to look more into James Baldwin. Let me get my screen up.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great picture.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'll put it from the start. Here we go. Never have figured out about this side thing with the pictures. So can you see all the words in Notes of a
Yes.
Native Son?
Yeah,
Yes.
looks great.
The pictures aren't in your way?
No,
No.
Pictures
I
of
never-
us? Okay, good. Because I like to see our faces while I'm talking. So here we have really a great picture of this amazing man. He lived from 1924 to 1987. And Nina, Claire and I have spent some time in the last year studying Howard Thurman, who was also a Black man who lived in the 20th century. And I would be inclined to call Howard Thurman a prophet, a pastor and a prophet. And likewise, I would call James Baldwin a realist, a critic, and a lover of humankind. He, in my mind,
saying about him.
he is as important as anybody in the 20th century, in my opinion. He and Howard Thurman, I would like to study together and even maybe do some work on integrating what they both believed and lived out and taught. So I just am thrilled to have gotten to do this. This was a last minute thing. Michael was supposed to do it and he had an opportunity to go out of town. So here we go. I'm learning as we go, though I have read the story. Have you both read the story?
yes.
I did not
Okay, that's
a
okay.
minute this week to do anything.
Yeah, and it's long, but I must say it's an easy read, but I just want to make sure I don't make references that are, too distant for you. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I actually have 3 different video links to watch just a little bit about him. We're not going to watch a lot, but these will be available on the website because this is being recorded, and
Okay.
I highly recommend going back and watching them. Oh, here comes Susan. Yay. Susan Lloyd, hi.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So the first link is, can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a great biography. I am not going to read it to you, just a little bit of information about him. As I said, he was born in 1924. He was the grandson of a slave. He was born in Harlem. He was the oldest of 9 children. He grew up in deep poverty and had a very strict, very religious stepfather who he had a very caustic relationship with. And that's what this story is about, which we read for today. This is just a really great biography that I want to make sure that you have to reference. I'm going to talk more about his life as we go on. The other thing that I wanted to open up for you, let's see. Oh, there's a participant. We have a chat going on. Oh, we have 5 participants. That's right. That's right. Never mind. Let me go back to my, so sorry. Go back to my PowerPoint. There it is. This I am going to play a little bit of. This is a wonderful, this is a wonderful little chat between Maya Angelou and, as she calls him, Jimmy Baldwin. As I understand it, she invited herself to be a part of his family. So they call each other sister and brother, and she refers to his family as his mother as her mother. It's precious, and you just have to listen to it. I'm sorry about this. This is my spelling bee that's going on. It's popping in. All right, here we go. Listen to this. You'll love this. This is a beautiful, beautiful conversation. Can you see it?
Not yet.
When you leave your house in
There
France
it is.
and come to the United States, when you leave your adopted home and come to your real home, what kind of response do you have inside yourself?
Let's try again.
I miss my family.
Mhm.
I miss,
When you leave your house
Now
in
can you
France
see
and
it?
come to the
Yes.
United States, when you leave your adopted home and come to your real home, what kind of response do you have inside yourself?
I miss my family.
Mhm.
I miss,
Let me pause this for just a minute. I should have told you, James Baldwin found life in this country so difficult that he moved to Europe. And this is what he's talking about right now. He lived in France, in Paris, and he lived in Switzerland. And he found it to be a great escape. And he talks in all of these interviews a great deal about how he felt like a real person when he lived in Europe, whereas in this country, he did not. He, because of the terrible racial situation in the mid 20th century. But that's what they're talking about right now. And Maya Angelou has just said, when you come back to your home where you are a native after you've been living in Europe, how do you feel? Hi, Michael.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking me to do this wonderful research. I'm in love with James Baldwin now.
a lot of people, you know, who are part of me,
Keep you alive.
you know,
Yes.
at a certain kind of speed, energy, beat, which only American black people have.
I know.
I miss that. When you say my home, it's not exactly my home. It's kind of asylum. It's a place where I can work. I have a lot of work to do. And if you are in a situation where you're always resisting and resenting, it's very
It
hard
takes too much
to.
energy.
Well, you can't write a book.
No.
You can't write a sentence.
No.
And
Most
I asked my
people-
brother David. We were driving through Harlem the other day. I was in Harlem. I was doing that. And I said to him, I wonder what would happen to me if I'd stayed. And you know, David,
I know that.
because I mean, you know, 'cause I also wanted to stay. You know, I
Yes, of course.
didn't want to go. David laughed. Laughed.
Terrible knowing laugh.
He said, "You'd be dead. Everybody else is."
That's right. And you look around at your friends long dead. Lost.
Well, David is 43. I'm 50.
That's
none of us-
something I
neither
wanna
of us-
talk to
neither
you
of
about
us know-
being 50.
About being 50?
Yes, but that's coming. Good.
Neither of us know anybody our age. My oldest nephew, who's 27, knows one person his age. Baby, this is a high-priced country.
Your family is closely knit.
I'm a very lucky cat.
You're very lucky. I find myself very lucky because I've been adopted into that family. So I find
That's not true.
myself.
You marched into it. You blamed my mother. I saw
I took it, didn't I?
you. You did.
I'm going to talk about mother in a while.
Go on.
But what does the family feel about you living in South of France? I mean, living away from them without, say, an arm reach distance, an arm out of
Sweetheart,
arm
you have to
reach.
understand. You have to understand what happens to my mother's telephone when I'm in town. People call her up and say what they were to me. If she doesn't make me shut up. You also got to remember that I've been writing after all between assassinations. But if you were my mother or my brother, you would think, who's next?
That's mama.
Did you all understand what he just said? That when he is in town, the people call his mother and tell them what they will do to him if she doesn't make him shut up. It's hard to,
Let's see. Yeah.
yeah. Let's just listen to a little more.
It's extraordinary. The woman raised 9 children, and every one of them.
Mm.
The difference between me and George, the difference between me and David, the difference between me and
You and Wilma.
and Willie, and all 5 girls. And though she was scared to death. Oh, no, really. No, really scared to death.
You mean of your father? Or
No,
after this
scared to
guy?
death of what was going to happen to us.
Yes, yes.
Because she knew something we didn't know.
Because you couldn't then.
And
say,
there we went.
Yeah.
And she never blackmailed us.
Yes.
And she just, I went to Paris, 1948. It was a rainy day. Mama came downstairs. Paula was upstairs. Paula was
That's the
5 years
baby.
old, the baby. And I can't explain to a baby why you got to do that. And she wouldn't talk to me. She was crying. The taxi drove away. And she let me go. She let it. I think at bottom she knew how much, maybe she knew better than I did, how much I loved them. And I didn't want her to see me turn into a junkie. No.
A prostitute. In any
no,
way.
Many ways. Go to jail, because nobody could call me nigger. I'd done the post office bit. I'd worked for the army. I'd been up and down those streets.
Yeah.
So now I had 5 minutes. I had to jump to save my life.
And they let you
That sounds very grandiose.
No, but
I'm gonna stop there just because it could go on and on. He's just, the interview is fascinating, and I'd highly recommend watching it. As I said, it'll be on the website. The next interview, I'm just going to show a little bit of this because this is kind of laying the groundwork for the voice of this beautiful story that we read for today. One thing I do need to tell you, and this is introduced at the very beginning of the story, it starts, James Baldwin is 19 years old. His father has died and is being buried, and his mother is in the hospital having their 9th child. So mother's not even at the funeral. So that's just kind of the groundwork, the foundation into which this story starts. So let's take a little clip. Everybody remembers Dick Cavett. This is from May 16th, 1969. And let's see if I can make it go.
Near me.
Can you see it and hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Baldwin, I'm sure you still meet the remark that what are the Negroes, why aren't they optimistic? And I apologize and preface this by the phrase "the Negroes" because it lumps together an awful lot of people. You and Floyd McKissick and Madam Clayton Powell and Hattie McDaniel and Jackie Robinson, and it's impossible, I suppose, but for want of a better phrase, if you'll allow me, they say, but it's getting so much better. There are Negro mayors. There's Negroes in all of sports. There are Negroes in politics. They're even accorded the ultimate accolade of being in television commercials now. I'm glad you're smiling. Is it at once getting much better and still hopeless?
Well, I don't think there's much hope for it, to tell you the truth. As long as people are using this peculiar language. That's why I was trying to convey before when I said that it's not a question of what happens to the Negro here, or to the black man here. That's a very vivid question for me, you know. But the real question is what's going to happen to this country. I have to repeat that. Now, if Negroes, you know, don't seem to be very optimistic, it's not because they suddenly all changed from happy, shiftless, dancing darkies down on the levee, picking all that cotton and singing praises to the master. They're not changed at all. They never were optimistic. All one's got to do is listen to Swing Low, Sweet Chariot and ask yourself what that song's about. Or try to really listen to what Ray Charles is really telling you. We have lived under these intolerable conditions for how many years? Maybe 400 years. We have evolved a certain kind of style to meet it. And a lot of that has been involved with the lies we had to tell to you. And the lies we had to tell to you compounds the disaster you believe because you wanted to believe it. But obviously you knew, every white man knows, that he would not himself, lying track for nothing. He would not himself allow his child to be sold from him as though the child were a mule. He would not himself allow himself not to have the autonomy of his own house and his own woman. He would not himself pick all that cotton and carry it to market just because he loved white people. We all know that. And the word Negro in this country really is designed finally to disguise that. And when it's talking about another man, a man like you, who wants what you want. And insofar as the American public wants to think there has been progress, they overlook one very simple thing. I don't want to be given anything by you. I just want you to leave me alone so I can do it myself. And it also overlooks another very important thing. Perhaps I don't think that this republic is the summit of human civilization. Perhaps I don't want to become like Ronald Reagan or like the president of General Motors. Perhaps I have another sense of life, which in fact my situation here has forced me to trust. And perhaps I know more about you and your institutions than you know about me. And perhaps I have a judgment on them. Perhaps I don't want what you think I want.
All right, I'm going to stop there because it too will draw you in. I actually have decided that I'm going to send this interview to all of my friends that I've done Sacred Ground with. If for those of you who don't know about the Sacred Ground program that we started at the cathedral last year, it's an excellent program produced by the Episcopal Church as part of the incentive to create beloved community. And it teaches the history of racism in this country, and it provides an approach to truth and reconciliation. We've had 7 groups, I think. Michael, are you in a group now?
Yes, I'm in the group that Joe O'Shields and Linda Privatera are leading.
Good, good. Would you like to make a comment about it up to this point?
It's something you have to have an open mind to commit to, because quite frankly, you're going to do some readings, do some reflections that are troubling. And it's tough to look inward so much at things that have happened and things that you might have been a part of. But it's really does open up minds and lead to better communication.
Claire and I are in a group up here as well. Claire, would you like to say anything about it?
I think it's really been amazing to, we're in the nascent stages, of course, but it's an unknown history. It's an unknown piece of history, and it's an unknown part of our culture. So we have action and consequences. And right now in our lifetime, we're dealing with consequences without fully understanding the actions that preceded them. So I think it's as a human being and part of the human family, I think it's an amazing study.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I agree. And I think this part about James Baldwin needs to be included, just as Howard Thurman is. There's not a lot about Baldwin in it. So that's going to be my next project. But let's go on. This is one of my favorite pictures that I found. James Baldwin was gay, and he was a Black man in the middle of the 20th century. And his life was just riddled with difficulty, poverty-stricken, abusive stepfather. But this is the man he loved, and he loved him deeply. This man's name is Lucian Happersberger, and they met in Switzerland when Jimmy was 24 and Lucian was 17. And they loved each other deeply, but Lucian ended up marrying a young Black woman named Diana Sands, who you might know as the actress from Raisin in the Sun. But they were only married for 3 years. It broke James Baldwin's heart. He didn't think he would recover, and then Lucian and Diane divorced, and Lucian came back to James, and they were together for the rest of their lives. Lucian was with James when he died of stomach cancer in whatever it was, 1987. So I think this is such a beautiful picture. They were deeply in love. So what we read for today was an essay from James Baldwin's book called Notes of a Native Son. It was written in 1955. As James Baldwin said, he was not able to write in this country. It was necessary for him to go to Europe for many reasons, one of which was to be able to have the freedom and the clarity to be able to sit and write. This is a collection of 10 essays, as I said, mostly tackling issues of race in America and in Europe. It was his first nonfiction book, and it was a collection of essays that were produced in various magazines prior to its publication. It was widely regarded as the classic of the Black autobiographical genre. And to be perfectly honest, as an English teacher for years, that's all I knew about this book, this story, and this man, that it was the classic Black autobiographical genre. It was the classic example. And I'm embarrassed to say that. And yet again, I thank Michael for asking me to do this so I could discover this wonderful man. The Modern Library placed it at number 19 on its list of the 100 best 20th century nonfiction books. And that is a very interesting photograph of him, I think, right there. Very different from the man we saw on the page before, and very different from the animated character that you see in those interviews. In this essay, Baldwin paints a vivid recollection of his time growing up with a paranoid father who, unbeknownst to the family until way too late, was dying of tuberculosis. And it also tells the story of his initial experience with Jim Crow style segregation. And he was radical about his reaction to Jim Crow segregation. And some of the stories are powerful and worth paying attention to. Right before his father died, Baldwin was befriended by a white teacher of whom his father disapproved. And that teacher is actually the one that helped him produce a play that he wrote. She became a very important part of their family and their family's ability to survive in the poverty in which they lived. Later, he worked in New Jersey, and that's where you really get the stories about his being turned down in segregated places, including the story about his furor when a waitress said, "We don't serve Negroes here." She said it twice, second time with some sense of apology, and he up and threw a half glass of water at her. It's a great story, of course, told from his perspective. And of course, then he realized what he'd done and what the dire consequences could have been. And I think those kinds of experience were also part of what made him realize he had to get out of America. He was not, as he said in the interview, when he asked his brother what would have happened if I'd stayed, and his brother said, "You'd be dead. You would, just like the rest of the people we know who have died." The next thing he could have said was, "You just talk too much. You just talk too much." So he goes on to say that, talk about the abuse of Blacks who were participating in the military in the South. Then he gives us an account of he recounts his father's death, which, as I said, occurred. I think the death and the death was the day before the baby was born. So the funeral was when mother was still in the hospital with the ninth, as I said, the ninth baby. And the funeral was also on James Baldwin's 19th birthday, and also the same day as the Harlem race riot of 1943. And Baldwin does some very interesting analysis of the turmoil and the hatred and the vitriol of the race riot taking place at the same time that his father was being carried through the streets in a hearse. One of the beautiful parts of this story is the reconciliation of the heart that comes with Baldwin as he listens to the message at the funeral and realizes who his father really was. He mourns not having known his father. And I think that's a big part of what spurs him to be such an activist. There's a line in here that really, really touched me deeply when he realized, he says, well, I'm gonna go through some questions here and I'll read it at that point. Let's do that. So again, Michael, have you read it?
Yes,
Okay, and Claire's read it. Susan, were you able to read the story? Good. Well, participate as you can, and I just think these questions are a really good way to look through the story. And if you have anything else to pipe in, please do. In this essay, Baldwin describes this difficult relationship we had with his stepfather. And it's curious, he starts the story saying, on the 29th of July in 1943, my father died. And throughout the story, he refers to him as his father, which perhaps gives us an idea of how deep the reconciliation was at the end. And it perhaps is a way that Baldwin tries to show how he feels about this man who he had such a caustic relationship with, was never able to show him when he was living. But according to Baldwin, what was wrong with their relationship? Why was it so tense? And what qualities did Baldwin seem to admire in his stepfather? And what qualities made him so angry?
I think his anger, we'll try to work backwards through that, is a lot of his anger was at his father's bitterness, which James was raging against himself, both incorporating and living and raging against. So it's a really good question. Maybe his stepfather was the epitome of what he felt was a life-taking rather than a life-giving force.
Yes. His father was so suspicious of education. And that was a great conflict for James Baldwin because he knew he was smart. He knew he was a thinking person and he loved education. And so there was that terrible conflict there. And Baldwin, I think, saw education as his lifeline. He loved school, and yet it was so suppressed by father. One of the things that the family didn't realize was the mental illness that father was struggling with, and then ultimately the tuberculosis. But stepfather also had faced dangers and struggles because of racism, and he was afraid of James Baldwin being exposed to those as well. I don't know if any of you have ever read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Growing. What is the name of that book? It's on the tip of my tongue. But it's a wonderful story about how he grew up as a Black man and how common it was for Black parents to warn the children of what to do and what not to do and what to stay away from so they would stay alive, and how brutal the Black parents were to their children simply to keep them alive. What is the name of that book? I highly recommend it.
I can't remember. I
Yeah.
can see the cover, but I can't remember the
Yeah,
name.
me too.
Owen, is it the one that's between me and the world?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Father had no communication skills. The mother just kept having babies. They kept living in poverty. James Baldwin could not understand why he didn't do something about it. And we see an interesting revelation, epiphany that Baldwin has at his father's funeral that answers that question for him. Let's see, there's a place there where I wanted to read. Yes, here it is. So despite the difficulties in their relationship, Baldwin did recognize that his father tried to show his devotion. I think Baldwin acknowledged that the devotion exists, but father had a hard time showing it. And at the end of the essay, Baldwin really expresses this deep gratitude to his stepfather for the legacy that he left his stepson. And yet that great tragedy that many of us know about not having had reconciliation with one we love until they are gone. And that doesn't go away. It lives with Baldwin for the rest of his life. But on page 31 of my my copy, Baldwin says, speaking of his father, he had lived and died in an intolerable bitterness of spirit, and it frightened me as we drove him to the graveyard through those unquiet, ruined streets to see how powerful and overflowing this bitterness could be, and to realize that this bitterness now was mine. When he died, I had been away from home for a little over a year. In that year, I had had time to become aware of the meaning of all my father's bitter warnings. I had discovered the secret of his proudly pursed lips and rigid carriage. And this is the line that really stuck. I had discovered the weight of white people in the world. So moving on, in the funeral sermon, Baldwin recounts the preacher describing Baldwin's father as a Christian inspiration. And Baldwin and his siblings, well, his siblings don't know the word disingenuous, but I think Baldwin did, and he thought, what is this man talking about? And he does a great job of describing the siblings just kind of at a loss for who this preacher is talking about. He refers to this preacher as one of the few people left in the world that really cared for his father. And that was such a sad statement. But Baldwin, and also, as our beloved Linda always says, during the sermon, Baldwin's bitterness begins to fall away. Why do the preacher's words have this effect on Baldwin? What does he say, or what do you recall that he says? He makes reference, he uses scripture. Baldwin, who was as a young man, as a teenager, was a preacher. He uses scripture to reference what we all know is that only the Lord really knows. Only God knows the truth of a person's life. And Baldwin realizes that his stepfather really must have agonized over the challenges he faced as the provider for these children. And the preacher emphasized that and says that he knows with certainty that the struggles, only God knows with certainty the struggles that any of us face. Let's see, the empathy this assertion creates in Baldwin causes his bitterness to dissipate. Suddenly he understands his father. And the preacher admonishes people for judging other people. And that really softens Baldwin's very bitter and angry heart and starts him on a course of remembering his stepfather's love for him.
I wrote this quote down, and maybe this is a Bible verse that I'm not familiar with. I mean, it's vaguely familiar, but I wrote down, "Thou knowest this man's falling, but not his wrestling."
Yes, he says that, and it is set apart as though it is a Bible verse. And the only thing I can find that it might be referencing I did some research on that because it does sound familiar, but it's not in scripture, but it is that same theme of you might think you know what he's been through, but you don't know what he's really wrestled with. And John 13:7 says, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." And that may be the next step that Baldwin, how he's sort of processing what this preacher has said.
During the preacher's sermon, I was taken, it was a very powerful little passage, I thought, where Baldwin described how suddenly snippets of certain memories just kept flashing back to him. And also at that moment, he felt that the alcohol in his own breath was not masked by the gum that he had. I think he was almost thinking that, we all have our flaws. I was focused on this man's flaws, and now I'm seeing that he was just a human. He was just like all of us.
It really, that's a very, very poignant story that listening to that sermon, it's just beautiful. My heart went out to him as I read this story, and I'm so glad there was a little bit of reconciliation for him, because the angst of that severed relationship was so painful, not to mention his living conditions and his conditions as a poor Black man, as a poor gay Black man, as a poor gay scholar, academic Black man, who basically had to run away from his country in order to survive. It's a hard story to read.
So how did he get enough money to go to Europe?
That's a good question. In one of the interviews, there is some conversation about that. Now, Does it talk about that in the story, or did I hear it in one of the interviews? I wonder if that white woman helped him.
Maybe it doesn't say it in the story. I wondered that. It's a good question. I wondered.
Yeah, I will tell you that I did read that his net worth when he died was $85 million.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Mhm.
But
great question, Susan.
Wayne, I see him just like anybody else that has had not a good feeling with a parent.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, when they get older and are more mature, they see they understand better the parent that they didn't get along with, and
Yeah.
the trials and tribulations that parent went through. Because when you're young, you're still the selfish young person, you know. You come in the world very selfish, and you have to learn to give that up and take care of others and be mindful of others. Your selfishness at birth is to survive.
Mhm.
I see him very much like other people I have known,
Mhm.
I have taken care of over the years as a nurse or whatever. You just see that in people.
Yeah. And his survival, as well as all the other conditions that he was struggling with, is quite remarkable. And I think it's quite impressive that he was brave enough to be honest about it.
The one thing I do see in people is no matter what you have done in life or whatever, when you are dead, you are absolutely the best person in life. And that's what you always hear at a funeral.
Yeah, it's true. That's
And
true.
I had a friend in Kentucky, she had been a school teacher, and she read the obituaries. This is when they used to start them out with some strange something. And she sent me one that the beginning of it, he was a very bad man. And that's, you never see that. So, just to me, he's just like most people.
Yeah, yeah. But he's, Susan?
That's that scripture of the sins of the fathers come
Mhm.
to the sons. The strict whippings and so forth that his father gave him. Of course, Baldwin didn't have any children, but that harshness towards life entered Baldwin's life because of the way he was treated.
Mhm. And that brings to mind, I'm going to skip ahead because I'm going to have to go here, but this quote is so powerful to me. I love America more than any other country in this world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. He is a great critic. He is a prophetic critic, perhaps, as Thurman is a prophetic pastor of the 20th century. And he's so well spoken. I love listening to him. So much energy, so much creativity, and yet it is so informed by not only the abuse of his father, but the abuse of his nation. I think a couple of important things to end with, and I know we could go on and on. I'm sorry that I have to go, but I think as we have done this series called Listening for God, it's important to think, where did you hear God, or where do you hear God in this story? And have you been noticing moments of listening for God more as a result of this faith forum? And then a comment about listening for God. When we incline our ears to these authors' stories, we hear words that doubt and defy and thank and chide and question and praise God. Where have you heard words like these? thinking back, because some of you have been at all of these faith forums, and you've been our faithful flock. And how has it affected you? How has it led you in your relationship with God? And then finally, oh, I do have, wait. I had one more question. And I don't know where it went, but my question is, what do you think James Baldwin would say about us today in 2021? What did you hear him talking about in 1969? And I think that was 79 when he was with Maya Angelou. What did you hear in those conversations that could be said today?
A call to consciousness, really, I mean, his messages have been timeless. There's a lot of the same frustrations, the same violence, and the same misunderstandings. When he told Dick Cavett, you don't know what I want. And we assume we know what people or the underprivileged want, and we don't. They have hopes and dreams of their own.
Yeah, and the statement about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I don't want to be wrong.
As well as that statement, I heard it last year said at my dinner table. But they've come so far.
Yeah, they've
come so far.
Those people.
Mhm. So I have to tell you, you all will be the first to know. I am beginning a new job today here at St. Mary's as the coordinator of Christian formation. So they've asked me to be a chalice bearer, and I couldn't say no. And I hope you all will forgive me for having to stop early. But
beautiful job, Owen. Beautiful.
Well,
for Jimmy Baldwin.
What a beautiful man. This will be recorded. It'll be put up. Please enjoy the videos. Oh, and one other thing. Claire sent me the most amazing interview between James Baldwin and, it's on the tip of my tongue and I can't say her name.
Margaret Mead.
Margaret Mead, which is extraordinary. I think it's an hour and a half. So but it's worth, and I didn't finish watching it. I highly recommend it. The most accomplished anthropologist in the 20th century speaking to this extraordinary man about humankind and where we have been in race relations and where we hope to go. I highly recommend it. So thank you all very much. I miss you. And I'll see you soon.